Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Hey, here we are, my friends. We have reached the end of another busy week, the end of another busy broadcast week here at the Excellence in Broadcasting Network, so let's go.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
And as most of you know by now, Open Line Friday differs from Monday through Thursday in only one way, and that is the subject matter of the callers that we permit. You do not know this, but this is one of the most tightly screened programs in all of broadcast history. Not only is it hard to get through here, once you get through, you have to pass a rigorous screening process. And the trick to getting past that is to tell Mr. Snerdley how much you love me, and then you'll automatically get on whatever else you want to say. But don't tell anybody I said that. Monday through Thursday, you have to talk about things I'm interested in, but Friday you don't. You can bring up anything you want. So have at it. Telephone number 800-282-2882, and the email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. I want to go back to one thing that happened in the final hour of the program yesterday and reiterate something. We had a very nice caller intimating that I was stupid, ignorant, and full of it, and embarrassing him, necessitating him having to defend me to people criticizing me because I had said nobody signed, the Iranians didn't sign the Iranian nuke deal that Obama had put forth. And he said he was trying to protect me from myself, trying to save me from myself, trying to prevent me being embarrassed in the future, and him, because he loves me, wants to defend me, but when I say stupid stuff like that, it's very hard. He wanted me to correct it. And, of course, I wasn't wrong. The Iranians never did sign it. And I mentioned all this. It happened in the third hour yesterday, so I wanted to mention it here at the beginning of the program and reach a perhaps additional number, a different segment of the audience. November 19th, 2015, the State Department sent a letter to then Congressional Representative Mike Pompeo that severely undercuts the idea that the Iran deal represents any form of binding American commitment. It turns out that Obama's own State Department, the Obama administration, not only acknowledged that the deal was not a treaty. By the way, somebody needs to tell that idiot Colbert, because he was out calling it a treaty, and how could Trump just unilaterally cancel it? The Obama administration not only acknowledged that the deal was not a treaty, which is obvious enough, it also admitted that it wasn't even an executive agreement, nor was it a signed document. Here are the key paragraphs I'm going to read to you from the Obama State Department. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, is not a treaty, it is not an executive agreement, and it's not a signed document. The JCPOA, the Iran deal, reflects political commitments between Iran, the P5+1 nations, the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, China, and the European Union. As you know, the United States has a longstanding practice of addressing sensitive problems in negotiations that culminate in political commitments. The success of the Iran deal will depend not on whether it is legally binding or signed, but rather on the extensive verification measures we've put in place. You realize the folly of this? Something that the Iranians didn't sign, the Obama administration said doesn't matter whether they agree to it and abide by it. Why would they abide by it if they didn't sign it? The success of the Iran deal will depend not on whether it was legally binding or signed, but rather on the extensive verification measures we have put in place in a document that has no weight, as well as Iran's understanding that we have the capacity to reimpose and ramp up our sanctions if Iran does not meet its commitments. Well, guess what? We did this week under the auspices of President Trump. So not only was it not signed, and not only was it not a treaty, it wasn't even an executive agreement. It was nothing more than a statement of principles, which is exactly and all that the Paris Climate Accords ever have been. They have no officialdom to them. They were nothing more than a collection of nations making promises to try to limit CO2 emissions by X percentage, whatever country they wanted to promise and pledge, over the next whatever number of years. So there was never any force of law. There was never any treaty. There was, as I said yesterday, it was nothing more than Obama's personal political preferences that nobody had the audacity to disagree with because he's the first African-American president. But I just wanted to stipulate it wasn't signed. It wasn't ratified. The Iranians never signed it. It was never anything that was actually enforceable. And add to the insult of this, we paid them $150 billion to get them to ostensibly behave. We lifted sanctions, we gave them $150 billion, and then we offloaded $1.5 or $1.8 billion in cash on pallets. That was essentially payments for the release of hostages the Iranians were holding, American hostages. And even when this was all done, John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State at the time, admitted that some of the money would indeed, he said a slice of it, would find its way to terrorist client states of Iran. So I very much, let me just say, I very much am sensitive and aware of how desperately all of you want me to be right and how you don't want me to make a mistake. You are very protective, and I appreciate it. But on this one, no error and no mistake. And I just wanted to wrap it up. And I think the fact that even the Obama State Department admits that it wasn't signed by the Iranians, much less not being a treaty, reinforces the point that I made yesterday. If you really believe in something, your president, get the elected representatives of the people behind it. Make it a treaty. Trump could not have gotten rid of this if it were a treaty. If it were a treaty, we would have been committed to it. But note, he couldn't get the votes of the Senate for a treaty. Nobody was in favor of this deal. Nowhere near the number of people required to make it a treaty or to give it any kind of statutory force of law. So it was nothing more than Obama's personal preference. Now, the caller said that he was concerned, he was worried, because this is the only place he had heard that the Iranians hadn't signed it, and that worried him. Ladies and gentlemen, that's often the case. This is only, or the only place you will hear things that are accurate and true. Don't doubt me. But I appreciate the desire. I understand the need to be protective and so forth. And I understand you've got these friends, and you've been telling them to listen for years, and they won't do it because they think I'm whatever the media says. And then the one day they tune in, and you think I blow it by saying the Iranians didn't sign the deal. Now you got to defend me. You don't think you can, but you can. You can always defend me. Just do it. Now we move on to another subject that we discussed yesterday, and that is, I spent some time putting together three stories, a Kimberly Strassel column from last Friday, a Wall Street Journal editorial yesterday that I'm sure she wrote, and a Washington Post story on Wednesday involving Devin Nunes, House Intelligence Committee, demanding to see evidence from the FBI of a source of information, and the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, was refusing to let Nunes see this stuff. Whatever was ultimately shared was heavily redacted. And it led, cutting to the chase here, it led to my belief, was not hard to figure out. It looked like that, in fact, the FBI had an informant in the Trump campaign. We still don't know when, and it'll be interesting when we do learn to find out when this plant was implanted in the FBI. Did it happen before the FISA warrant request? Did it happen after that? It'll be because when we find out when the FBI put an informant in the Trump campaign, then a lot of other things they have said will either be demonstrated as true or that they have lied to us. Well, Kimberly Strassel is back today with a column about that FBI source. Did the Bureau engage in outright spying against the 2016 Trump campaign? And I want to read to your last paragraph. I believe I know the name of the informant, she writes, but my intelligence sources did not provide it to me, and they refused to confirm it. It would therefore be irresponsible to publish the name of the informant. What is clear is that we have barely scratched the surface of the FBI's 2016 behavior, and the country will never get the straight story until President Trump moves to declassify everything possible. It is time to rip off the Band-Aid. She said that we know that among the Justice Department's stated reasons for not complying with the Nunes subpoena was its worry that to do so might damage international relationships. Okay, well, that suggests that this source, the spy, the implant, may be overseas, may have ties to foreign intelligence or both, and that's notable given the highly suspicious role that foreigners have played in this escapade. It was an Australian diplomat who reported that George Papadopoulos' conversation, when he was liquored up, made some comment about Trump and having dirt on Hillary and the Russians and so forth. It was a Clinton donating Australian diplomat who ratted out Papadopoulos. The FBI has said three things. They have said that this whole investigation began with the FISA warrant on Carter Page. And they said, no, it began with the FISA warrant. We found out Trump was colluding. They said, no, it didn't begin with Carter Page. It began with Papadopoulos. We've had three different versions of when the FBI investigation began. So they had a plant. They had a spy. They had an informant in the Trump campaign. Now, a lot of people have been speculating who it is. I don't have any idea, folks. I really don't. A lot of people think it's Papadopoulos. Some people think it's George Nader. I haven't the slightest idea, and I'm content to wait to find out because to me, that's not the point. For our purposes, folks, the important thing is that the Obama administration infiltrated the Trump campaign with a spy. That's the important thing. Who it is, we will eventually learn. But we don't need to know who it is to know what the FBI did. When I say the FBI, I mean the Obama administration. They infiltrated the Trump campaign with a spy, and while they had that spy implanted, they were unmasking and leaking and obtaining FISA spying warrants and conducting criminal investigations of Trump advisors. This is a big deal. It is a gigantic big deal. Who the informant was will eventually be learned, as will some other details. I think if you dig deep, we'd have to conclude that it's an American, that the CIA, the FBI, and no doubt MI5 ran in Britain. And I think it's probably somebody that Christopher Steele knows. And I think I don't think it's Papadopoulos. I think the spy, I think they ran the spy on Papadopoulos. And I think they deployed their spy on some of the sources that Christopher Steele worked in prepping his dossier. Remember that Steele did all of his work in Britain. He hasn't set foot in Russia for 20 years. He was outed in Russia as a British operative in the late 90s, and he has not been able to go back. And all of his sources, or the vast majority of them, are Russian. So he's apparently talking to him on the phone. I think the spy that the FBI had in the Trump campaign was run on Papadopoulos and some of the sources that Steele worked. Now, all of this made it to Fox and Friends today. We start out here at Pete Hegseth when the show just got going today.
Rush Limbaugh yesterday had a good take on all of this and these developments. Listen to Rush.
Everybody now that's been studying this is convinced that the FBI did have an informant and that they planted the informant. So they had somebody in there actually spying, looking for collusion, and they still don't have it. What does it say that they even had the audacity to plant an informant in the presidential campaign of one candidate? Not Hillary, but Trump. It tells you they really believe this nonsense, that the Russians and Trump were buddies and were colluding to steal the election. And that just boggles my mind. This is going to be one of the most embarrassing periods in the FBI's history when all of this is finally revealed and the history of it written. Up next was co-host Steve Doocy.
There's one person who can declassify everything with one signature, and the signature would say, Donald Trump.
Kimberly Strassel makes this observation, and in fact, in her column today, begs, encourages, pleads with the president to do it. But he doesn't do it, does he? The president could declassify, she's right, everything. The FISA warrant application, who is this informant, who is this spy, when was the spy hired, who actually did it, what did the spy do, everything Devin Nunes wants to see. Trump could order it declassified. Why doesn't he do it? Okay, I'm getting emails feverishly here. Rush, you got to remember something here, that Nunes and Trey Gowdy were not shown the documents yesterday. That's true. They were not shown. I didn't say that they were. They went up to the DOJ, FBI, and they had a meeting with Rosenstein and some deputies about these documents that have the details on who the spy was, who the informant was, when he was hired and all that. They were not shown the documents. The reason they were not shown the documents is that Nunes et al. Have been requesting this information for months. The DOJ/FBI has been stonewalling on the basis that if they reveal the information, lives could be lost. National security implications. But that's not why, just as we've learned that the other redactions were simply to cover up embarrassing behavior by the FBI, by Comey, by McCabe. The odds are here that they're simply trying to withhold the information from Congress because it's embarrassing. Not because lives are at stake. Now, Nunes and Gowdy are due back up at the DOJ next week to further the quote-unquote negotiations to see what they have wanted to see for months that they have been refused. It was yesterday Paul Ryan backed up their request by saying it was highly appropriate. When Ryan did that is when the DOJ agreed to take the meeting with Nunes and Gowdy. But the original reporting was that Nunes and Gowdy had been shown this redacted material. They have not yet been shown that. That hopefully will happen next week. The FBI does not want to share it. The DOJ does not want to share it. They've been stonewalling on this, even under subpoena, for months. You can understand why. They've hired a spy here. The Obama DOJ hired a spy to spy on the Trump campaign. It's obvious why they don't want to give this up. Now, I need to correct myself on something about treaties. So the same guy doesn't call back yesterday, say he's embarrassed. Don't go away. Okay, now, up next is a re-examination of why President Trump won't just declassify all of this. And I want to tackle this again because I'm relatively certain that I have the answer. And it's somewhat complicated, or complex, let's put it. It's not complicated. It's easy to understand once somebody explains it to you. But before I get there, I need to correct myself. I said that presidents do not have the ability to unilaterally withdraw from treaties, and they do. George W. Bush pulled us out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty that we had with the Soviets/Russia over Russia's protest. Russia protested us pulling out. Bush did it on the theory that the USSR no longer existed. We had an ABM treaty with the Soviet Union. Soviet Union is no longer there. They are now Russia and Vladimir Putin. So Bush 43 pulled us out on the basis that the people we made the agreement with are gone. And he was able to do so. And there's some misunderstandings pretty common about the way treaties work, including most people think that the Senate ratifies them and that's how they get put into effect. And in fact, it is the president who ratifies treaties. The way it works is president signs the treaty, then it gets submitted to the Senate for the quote-unquote advise and consent. If the Senate approves the treaty by a two-third vote, it is said to have consented to the treaty. At that point, it's up to the president to actually ratify or implement it. And so there's nothing to unilaterally undo. The president is not disrespecting the Senate when he unilaterally withdraws from a treaty, because presidents are the actual office that implements them. And the reason for this is that foreign relations is an executive power. The legislative branch does not have dominating power over the executive branch when it comes to foreign affairs. The Constitution says the president cannot ratify a treaty unless the Senate consents, but it does not require Senate consent for a president to withdraw from a treaty, because the Constitution does not permit the legislative branch to trump the presidency when it comes to foreign affairs. I mistakenly said that even if the Iran deal were a treaty that Trump could not have withdrawn from it. That was wrong. He could have. But it wasn't a treaty. It wasn't even a signed agreement. I'm just cleaning up the mess here because I got something wrong and I want to get it right. There's some other questions about this whole Iran thing. Since the Senate didn't ratify it, didn't vote to ratify it, didn't consent to it, because they didn't have the votes for it. That's why Obama did not submit the treaty or create a treaty and submit it to the Senate. There was never any popular support for the Iran deal, which is why it was strictly an Obama personal policy preference. It wasn't even an executive action. It was just Obama knowing full well that nobody was going to tell him no, that nobody was going to say he couldn't do it. Obama really capitalized on being the first African-American president in American history. He really capitalized on the paralysis that swept over all critics. He capitalized on that brilliantly. But here's a question. Since there was no way either house of Congress was going to express support for it, then why did Obama make the deal? Why was there an Iran deal? Nobody wanted it. Iran didn't sign it. Congress would not have approved it. Nobody was demanding it. Obama just had this guy, Ben Rhodes, write it up on his iPhone and then later write a piece marveling over how stupid the American people were to accept whatever they said at the administration they were going to do. They send out a press release, and that was that. We've got an Iran deal. Then they send the Iranians $150 billion. They lift sanctions, and then send the Iranians another $1.8 billion in cash. What was so important to Obama that he had to fake this thing? And by the same token, what was so important about it that all these people are reacting way over the top when we pull out of it? I mean, Kerry, Obama, everybody had anything to do with this thing is acting like this is the biggest transgression Trump has done yet. Why? What really was this? What was this Iran deal when nobody wanted it, nobody was demanding it, nobody asked for it? So we create out of whole cloth this fantasy that we've got a deal where the Iranians are promising not to do nuclear weapons, which we know is not true. We pay them $150 billion. They don't even sign it. What was really the objective here? We will probably never know. But it's safe to assume the real reason this was done had nothing to do with whatever the reasons we were given by Obama and his administration. Why double down on a fake deal with an airplane load full of cash? And where did that cash come from? I don't know. Obama just can't walk over to the Treasury and submit his presidential ATM card and withdraw $1.5 billion, put it on a bunch of pallets, load it into an airplane, and fly it over to Tehran. Where do you get the money? There's so much of this that's just rotten to the core that nobody wanted it. Nobody would have supported it had it ever come to a vote. Suspicious as it can be. All right, now back to the final element of the Kim Strassel story, that there is a spy or was a spy in the Trump campaign put there by the FBI. The final paragraph of her piece today says that it's time for Trump to declassify everything so that we can finally, once and for all, learn everything that happened and put an end to this investigation. Learn who the informant is. Learn everything there is to know about the FISA warrant application. What's in there besides the Steele dossier? What other things did the FBI use when asking the FISA court for a warrant to spy on Carter Page? Trump could, Kimberly Strassel is exactly right. Trump could declassify all of this, but he doesn't. Now, on previous occasions, I have said, and I think I've created a little bit of a misconception I want to try to straighten out here. I've said that I believe the president likes playing the victim because it solidifies the bond between him and his voters. It allows him to keep tweeting, for example, about the witch hunt. It allows him to continue to tweet very critical things. And I'm using the word victim incorrectly because Trump, of all things, is not a victim. Now, I did say he enjoys playing the victim, but I think there's a better analogy. Because what I think Trump is doing here, if I might say so, is rather strategically brilliant. Every day that goes by, it's becoming more and more obvious to more and more people what an absolute joke this whole investigation is. You know and I know that it takes ongoing repetition over and over and over and over again for even intelligent people to hear things and believe them. When we're talking people that don't pay a whole lot of attention every day to this stuff, it takes a lot of repetition over and over and over again. Every day that this goes by, every day that the Democrats are building their future on a porn star, every day that the Democrats are building their future on impeachment, every day that goes by that there isn't any evidence for any of this is an ongoing, slowly building victory for Trump. I think Trump has masterfully captured the narrative from Mueller and from Rosenstein, from the intelligence community, from Brennan, from Clapper. Here you have the most accomplished person ever to be elected president since our founders, I made this observation yesterday, and I don't think it's arguable. Donald Trump has succeeded in more ways, in more things in life than any previous president in our lifetimes. And I'm talking about in and outside of government, in the private sector. And it matters because that's where Trump's expertise is, and the swamp knows nothing about it. The swamp, the Washington establishment, the elites look down their nose at people like Trump and any others who are not in their establishment. So here you have a multi-billionaire, overwhelming success story who has managed to create a narrative where he is David and they are Goliath. And that probably is a better analogy for what I mean, that Trump enjoys playing the victim. They are the monster. They are the unfair. They are the outsized big guys against whom the Davids in life have no chance, no prayer. And Trump is slaying them. And he's slaying them each and every day. It's little by little, and some days you go by and you think Trump's losing. Some days you go by and you think Trump's going to lose, going to get in. But, folks, he can't get indicted. Donald Trump will never be forced from office in a constitutional way because there will never be two-thirds vote for it in the Senate, no matter what happens in the midterms. This is what I have told you from the beginning it is. This is an effort to drive Trump's public approval numbers down to the 20s so that he ultimately will have to be told by people like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, sorry, Mr. President, we do not have any support for you left on Capitol Hill. You have to resign. This is all about forcing Trump to resign, and it's all based on trying to drive his unpopularity sky high, and that's where he's killing him. That is where he's snookering him. That's where he's winning each and every day. They thought they'd get this done the first 6 months, and they're not even close now, folks. And now they're flailing away with porn stars. And little leaks here, little leaks there, Trump this or that. Meanwhile, Trump just keeps being Trump. Appears unfazed and unaffected by any of it. His approval numbers are holding steady at anywhere, depending on the poll, from 42 to 51%. And to the extent that they're moving, they're inching up. Robert Mueller is being portrayed as somebody who has the power to determine whether Donald Trump stays in office or not, and he doesn't. Remember my analogy last week? If you landed here from Mars and you didn't know anything about the way this country works, you would think there's a permanent overseer of our government who determines who's fit and who isn't. And in this case, it's Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller doesn't have any power whatsoever to get rid of Donald Trump constitutionally. And they're not going to try it that way. This is all about humiliation, embarrassment, raising his negative numbers, hopefully to make him resign. That's not going to happen. And Trump knows it's not going to happen. So I think he's letting this play out, sort of like giving them enough rope. They'll eventually hang themselves. But the analogy is that he's David, they're all Goliath. We know how that story ends. Another way of looking at it, he enjoys being David. He enjoys being the little guy, the apparent little guy that this whole gigantic array of Washington establishment types is aligned up against, doing everything they can to destroy him, and it isn't happening. I got to take a break. I'm a little long. We'll be back. Don't go away. Folks, this is also why anybody with a brain is trying to tell Trump not to talk to Mueller. Mueller's got nothing. Mueller isn't going to have anything that can get rid of Trump. It's time to finally say this. The only way you get rid of a president, 25th Amendment or impeachment. Impeachment is filing charges in the House. Then there's a trial in the Senate. And you got to get two-thirds vote in the Senate. There's nowhere near two-thirds vote in the Senate to get rid of Donald Trump. It isn't going to happen. 25th Amendment, it's not going to happen. Mueller can't do anything unless Trump makes the mistake of talking to him. And then Mueller can hatch one of these perjury traps. But even at that, presidents cannot be indicted. And Mueller knows this. The whole point here is to destroy Trump's reputation in the eyes of the public. This is how they got rid of Nixon. If you'll recall, they drove Nixon's numbers down to the 20s and Howard Baker goes up. Mr. President, I'm sorry to tell you that if it came to impeachment, you do not have the support here to survive. If you'll notice, that's the only mechanism by which the media and the left have succeeded in getting rid of the president is exactly what they're doing now. They're so caught up in the Watergate motif that they're trying to relive it. They're trying to reenact it. Everybody that drive by wants to be the new Woodward and Bernstein. And Mueller wants to be the committee conducting hearings in Congress. And it just, the lack of originality, the lack of anything that's actually explicitly tied to this. Well, there isn't anything to tie it to. There was no collusion. There was no criminality. And see, look, as time goes on, look what we're learning that the FBI, the DOJ, the Obama administration had a spy. They had an informant in the Trump campaign. There's more of this stuff to come out, I'm certain. But there's no way that Mueller can get rid of Trump unless Trump talks to him. Even then, the perjury trap still leads to an indictment. No president has ever been indicted. It won't happen. Man, oh man, I don't know where the first hour has gone, but it has gone. So we have to take a break here at the top of the hour, but we're coming back. I promise we'll start soon on phone calls. We got a full board. It's Open Line Friday. I've invited the people call. A polite thing to do would be to talk to them. And so that's what's going to happen at some point. The views expressed by the host on this program documented to be almost always right, 99.8% of the time. That's incredible.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
Righto, 800-282-2882. If you want to be on the program, and the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Hang on a minute. Oh, look at this. You know, this is incredible. As I was going through my explanation mere moments ago, my theory about why Trump does not declassify all of this documentation, CNN was covering it as I was saying it. And we have the audio soundbite here. This is John King on CNN. This is mere moments ago while I was actually discussing. I've not heard the bite. Let's see how accurate it is. It's number 25. I forgot to test the soundbite 20. Do we have
whether you like or don't like Rush Limbaugh, he gets this just right.
I think the president likes the perception that they're out to get him. He loves tweeting about the witch hunt. He loves tweeting that they're out to get him. I think he believes that appearing as a victim of this giant deep state effort to get rid of him solidifies the bond he has with his supporters.
And it has two goals, essentially. Number one, we're in a midterm election year where Democrats have an intensity advantage, the president trying to gin up his support. But number two, if Mueller comes out with more charges against more people or a critical report, the president's trying to convince at least about a third of the American people, pay no attention to it, don't believe it.
No. See, this is where these guys go off track. They should listen to what I say. I say what I mean. Let's as the saying goes, let's unpack this. I have amended my use of the word victim here as an analogy, and I've recast this as Trump as David and the swamp Mueller, the establishment, as Goliath. And we know how that story ends. Now, it's all predicated on a simple question. The president of the United States, whoever he is, can declassify whatever he wants. He can declassify anything going on in the DOJ, the FBI, CIA. He can declassify whatever, including all of the aspects of this investigation. So the latest is from Kimberly Strassel. There's a spy. The FBI hired a spy. There is an informant that was working in the Trump campaign. She thinks that she knows the identity of the spy, but she doesn't want to publish it because she can't get any independent confirmation. As far as I'm concerned, and we'll eventually learn the name. The name doesn't matter to me right now. What's important for our purposes is the Obama administration hired an informant. The Obama administration had a spy in the Trump campaign. That's all we need to know. We know this is the case. We know it's true now because of the efforts of Devin Nunes, Trey Gowdy to declassify some documents they've been subpoenaing from the DOJ and the FBI. And Rosenstein will not declassify, will not send up this stuff that's after it's been unredacted. There was a meeting yesterday between Nunes and Trey Gowdy and Rosenstein. It was incorrectly reported that Nunes was shown this information. He was not. The meeting yesterday was a quote-unquote negotiation over it. They're going to have another meeting next week where Nunes expects to be shown. And if he's not, then sparks will fly. But the Washington Post has all but admitted that there was an informant implanted in the Trump campaign. Kimberly Strassel's put two and two together, and she thinks she knows who it is. So why doesn't Trump just declassify this and tell everybody? Why just end this suspense and end all this and let it be known? And that's where my theory comes into play. I believe that the president wants to expose. I believe Trump wants to expose all of these people and their techniques, that they don't have any evidence, and yet they continue to try to destroy him and his presidency and anybody he had anything to do with. Because it furthers, if you will, a meme or a narrative. And the narrative is that the Washington establishment hates this guy and wants to get rid of this guy and will do anything to do it. And I've just concluded that as far as Trump is concerned, he thinks that there is value in having people see this. Because, I want to stress something again. I know there's a lot of panic, anger over the fact that the media is making it look like if Mueller gets the goods, he can get rid of Trump. There are two ways that happens. One is the 25th Amendment, which isn't going to happen. That's the cabinet getting together and deciding the president's unfit. The other way is via impeachment. That ultimately requires the Senate, 2/3 of the Senate, to vote to convict on impeachment charges brought by the House. It isn't going to happen. I don't think it ever has. I don't think that we've ever gotten rid of a president in one of these constitutional ways. Nixon resigned. He was not impeached. That's what they're trying to make happen, or what their original purpose was with Trump. Just to repeat this one more time. Since the networks are monitoring, I want to do everything I can to help them get what I'm saying right. The whole point of this, well, I think they may have thought at the beginning Trump colluded. I think they're that dumb. But the argument against that is they're the ones that were colluding. Hillary was colluding. Hillary paid for this opposition research document, this dossier. It still boggles my mind to think that some of these people actually might have believed that Trump was colluding with Russia and that somehow they stole an election. That still boggles my mind that we have otherwise intelligent people who would believe that. But I guess we have to consider that maybe they did when they started this. But going the impeachment route, since it hasn't ever successfully been done, it's going to be a huge task. The easiest thing to do is have never-ending innuendo, never-ending leaks, never-ending negative news. I mean 24/7 negative news on Trump, designed to drive his personal approval numbers down to the point that they can make him resign, because he has lost support everywhere. And that remains the objective of all this. But it isn't working because Trump's approval numbers are holding steady. The latest that I've heard about the Mueller investigation, you realize he's now looking at possible crimes in funding the inaugural committee. Really? What does that have to do with collusion with the Russians? Anyway, you may have your own theory as to why Trump does not just declassify all this. And as Kimberly Strassel says, rip the Band-Aid off this, let everybody see it. I think Trump is smarter than these people going after him. I think he sees what they're doing, and I think he has decided there's value. And there is a potential winning strategy here. John King says, whether you like or don't like Rush Limbaugh, he gets this just right and plays the bite where I explain that Trump likes being seen as the victim. And I've amended that. I don't actually think Trump, he doesn't play victim well, because in Trump's mind, he's not. He's never a victim of anything. What he's doing is setting up a narrative. The David and Goliath analogy is the best I can do to explain the narrative Trump is setting up. Let's go to the audio soundbites and try to illustrate one side of this. Grab soundbite number 4. Last night in Washington, the Aspen Institute. This is the 4th annual Aspen Security Forum. The former CIA director, John Brennan, said this about Trump and his impact on the country.
I think if the Republican Party is going to salvage itself from the trauma...
Wait, that's number 5. We need to go to number 4, please. 4 first. If we had 3, 2, 1.
This is a very large and painful national kidney stone. The relief we feel afterward is going to be just exhilarating. Unfortunately, I think Mr. Trump has been fueling polarization and partisanship in this country. And that is very much, I think, undermining what this country really is all about. Just breaking norms left and right. What signal is that sending to the young children of this country? What signals is it sending to the world?
You know, this is outrageous in its own way, because there has never been a more purposefully partisan president than Barack Obama. Barack Obama set out to divide this country and capitalize on it. Barack Obama set out to create as many divisions in this country as he could, and then assemble a coalition of all of the so-called minorities in these divisions as his winning coalition. And he succeeded. Look at how divided America's campuses are today. Look at how divided American politics is. Obama didn't unify anything. Remember how everybody thought the election of the first African-American president would provide unity like we haven't seen. It would prove the country has lost its racism tendencies, that we've come together. It did the exact opposite, and that was predicted. Trump has not been fueling polarization and partisanship. Trump has been preaching American greatness. Now, who is it that finds that provocative? Who in the world finds American greatness to be a partisan issue? It's loco weeds like John Brennan and Hillary Clinton and Crazy Bernie and all these other people who think that making America great again is somehow insulting, that it's insulting to minorities. They don't know a great America, and you don't want to include them in your great America, is what they all say. Where did it ever happen that American greatness, that American exceptionalism is a provocative and partisan agenda? Because that's what Trump's agenda is. Undermining what this country really is all about, that's what Trump's doing. Once again, I would point to Obama, who said that this country needed to be transformed. It was Obama unhappy with what this country is. It was Obama who said he needed to transform this country. It was Obama who started spelling out how America was wrong here and needed to apologize over here and so forth. It was Barack Obama who spearheaded the whole politics of division, and he succeeded at it. What signal is Trump's partisanship sending to the young children of this country? What signal is it sending to the world? I think the signal being sent to the world is that America's back and that America is focused on its greatness and its strength again. Question about what signal is this sending to the young children? What does that matter? They're children. They're not even adults yet. Since when does partisanship extend to childhood, for crying out loud? Anyway, I play this to give you an idea of just how turned upside down these people are. They can't believe they haven't been able to get rid of him. They can't believe that this guy has outsmarted them at every turn. They can't believe that he got elected. They spied on him. They used Hillary Clinton opposition research and tried to pass it off as real intel on him. They have used every dirty trick in the book on him, and it didn't work, and that's what they can't abide. Here's the next Brennan bite from the Aspen Security Forum last night in Washington.
I think if the Republican Party is going to salvage itself from the trauma of Mr. Trump, and that's what I think it is, they really need to be able to reach deep inside themselves and find their North Star and say, are they Republican partisans first and Trump loyalists first, or are they Americans first? And are they going to do what's right for this country?
What do you do with this? I mean, the Republicans have their problems, but it's not because of Trump. All Trump did was win the election. Isn't this fast? The guy that wins the election is a guy that owes it to everybody to fix what's wrong. The guy that wins the election is the guy that's made all the mistakes. The guy that wins the election is taking the country away from its North Star. If the Republican Party is going to salvage itself, Mr. Brennan, the Democrat Party is in deeper doo-doo than you apparently know. Your party doesn't even have an agenda it can publicly state and get behind. The Democrat Party agenda today is why Donald Trump is president, Mr. Brennan, and we'll be back after this. Open Line Friday, Rush Limbaugh, half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair so the media can keep up. And even when I do that, the odds are they're not going to keep up. We start in Conway, South Carolina. This is Dave. Great to have you on the program, sir. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call, to you and Snerdley. The point of my call today was, after you can kind of digest what's gone on the last couple of years with the spying and unmasking of people that were associated with Donald Trump, it kind of leads me to another question as to part of the reason why the uncovering of what's really going on is being stonewalled and things. I suspect now that we've seen what happened to candidate Trump and now President Trump, I think that he was just the tip of the iceberg. Because if you remember in the campaign, the smart donor money was behind Jeb, and Ted Cruz was making a real run at it. And no one ever talks about or looks at who was looking into those two individuals that were candidates and possibly others. I think by the time this thing is finally over, and I think that's part of the reason that the uncovery is being stonewalled, is that this goes much deeper than Donald Trump, to the point where I think it may have even entered into some senatorial races over the years and possibly even into the last campaign. Because what's going on now you never thought could happen in America, and now that we know it has, I'm afraid this may just be the tip of the iceberg, and no one's looking under the other snow caps, if you will.
Well, except whatever is being requested and denied by Devin Nunes and his committee has nothing to do with the campaign races or any of that. This is strictly about how the FBI has conducted itself and when it did various things that are already known vis-a-vis the Trump campaign, and they're not coming forth with that. If there have been FBI spies, if Obama, I guess that's what you're saying, Obama had spies all over Republican campaigns, maybe Hillary too, and that stuff is lurking out there waiting to be discovered, and Trump wouldn't want that revealed either. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that could really potentially maybe pose some problems for the country, but I think that's part of the reason some of those inside the Justice Department and the people, the names that we all know, Strzok and, all these other people, I'm just afraid this isn't the first instance of it, and he is not the first candidate. It's just no one's looking at who is maybe unmasking associates of Ted Cruz or Jeb Bush or things like that. No one talks about it, no one looks, because that's not an issue. They're not the president. My contention is they could have quite possibly have been their associates unmasked, and they themselves, by the unmasking, then of course people are looking at you, and then subsequently you as a candidate are being recorded because they're supposedly looking at this Russian person or Bolivian or whatever country, the excuse they use to unmask somebody. I think that this thing could just really be the tip of the iceberg, as I say.
Well, it may be, but we don't know that. But we do know, for our purposes, we do know that it happened with Trump. The rest of that, that's speculation, wild guess. Sounds interesting, but we have no idea. I don't know why anybody would put a spy into Jeb's campaign anyway. But, I mean, I'm sorry, that was just my reaction when you said it. I mean, why? And since it's Open Line Friday, going to stick with the calls. Here is Mark in Traverse City, Michigan. Welcome, sir. Glad you waited. What's happening? What's shaking? What's up?
Thanks for taking my call, Russ. I'm calling on a flip phone from Real, Indiana. I have a question. Looking at the cost and benefit of the Iran deal, we know what the cost is, but what is the benefit? Why are we spending billions of dollars and our allies also supporting this deal?
Well, that's just it. I asked the question, why did we do it? What was Obama so interested in doing this for? Nobody wanted it. Nobody supported it. It was going to cost it a large amount of money. Why? What was the whole point? I don't know. Now, your question about why are the allies still on board, is that what you said?
Yes.
Well, sadly, I think that's easy. Anti-Semitism. I think European Union hatred for Israel explains why there was a huge alliance of European Union nations with this crazy Iran deal. I don't think there may be other economic reasons that we don't know about. We don't know what Obama promised these countries. We don't know anything about this. Except we know how upset all these people are that Trump has pulled out of it. I mean, they are really, really upset, as are the Obama administration figures who were involved in it. It's a good question. Well, if we pulled out, why are these other signatories? Well, there aren't any other signatories since nobody signed it. But why are these European Union nations, so-called allies, staying in it? If you take a look, folks, at Europe, you find anti-Semitism is on the rise. And it's not just because a lot of these countries are allowing open border immigration from Muslims in the Middle East. There's rising anti-Semitism in Germany, native anti-Semitism, ditto in France. It's not talked about much, but the Israelis, they're not very popular with a whole lot of people. They never have been. Understanding why you'd have to get into detail about anti-Semitism. I don't think any of this is geopolitical or geohistoric. I mean, some of it may be, but I think that's the first top shelf answer that I would give. I mean, let's face it. The Iran deal was considered by Israel to be a huge threat. Israel, as far as we know, is the only Middle Eastern nation with a nuclear weapon. That just rubs people raw like you can't believe. And let's face it, the European Union is a bunch of linguini-spined leftists and socialists who really think the region ought to be turned over to the Palestinians. And they look at the Israelis as a bunch of mean-spirited extremists, the way conservatives in this country are seen by the left and by media. And having a deal and an alliance with Iran was a way to make a statement against Israel. And I think that's a large part of it. Now, it obviously won't explain or give every answer to it. Still a good question, but that's the first thing I would tell you. Here's Jay, Los Angeles. Great to have you. EIB Network, hello.
Mega Dittos Rush from Los Angeles.
Yeah, great to have you from Los Angeles. It's always great to get a call from there.
Yeah, I'm surprised they allowed the call to get out of here in the first place. As you know, I'm only 386 miles south of your adopted hometown, but the kicker is I'm 43 miles north of that ambulance chaser, the Democratic operative known as Michael Avenatti. And that's why I'm calling, Rush. I'm really sick of this guy. I'm sick of the Stormy Avenatti show, and everybody is treating Avenatti like he's some sort of hero, and Stormy is treating herself like she's some sort of victim. The only point I want to make to you is we got to put a nail in this coffin because it's severely underreported that Stormy, this isn't her first foray into political stunts. And I don't know if everybody knows about it, but this is the same person who, a lifelong Democrat, who ran against David Vitter with another Democratic operative back in the 2009 race against David Vitter down in Louisiana.
Was that Stormy? You're saying Stormy was involved in that?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Yeah, she's anybody can search it up take a look at it. And Stormy ran against David Vitter. Actually, she was originally, I think, some college kids drafted her, but then she formed an exploratory committee because we know Stormy loves to explore. It's just one of those things where once she saw that she had a chance to run, she basically put her hat in the ring and said, I'm going to, if people are going to screw people for money, she said that, she had some sort of slogan where, she's going to do it honestly. And I'm like, this is not honestly, Stormy. You basically had a Democratic operative handler that created a media circus to try to get David Vitter knocked out of that race.
Well, no, I remember that. I remember all of that. Yeah. I didn't know Stormy Daniels was at the center of it.
Oh, yeah, she was. And the reason she dropped out was she basically committed a misdemeanor when she physically assaulted what is now her ex-husband. So I guess she got mad over how he did the laundry. And so somebody ought to call him and ask him if, and I respect the victims of the Me Too movement. I'm thinking maybe he might be one of Stormy. Someone needs to do more reporting on this. And I know since the networks are monitoring, we'd like you to basically put out the word there that this is a repeat performance. It's probably more rote.
Well, when did look, you seem to be up to speed on this stuff. When did Stormy run into Avenatti?
Yeah, Avenatti. That's I think where we're missing in the reportage because to be honest with you, Avenatti is he's one of these guys who I mean, granted, the legal profession it is a profession, that's what they say. He seems to want his own show. I just can't figure out who's the media whore and who's the publicity hound. I can't figure it out for the life of me. So. He's just trying to get
let me give you the question about Avenatti. There's only one question about Avenatti. Who's paying him? Because Stormy isn't. Stormy does not have the money. Who is paying this guy and how much? And who found him to be her such and such lawyer? That's not even what's going on. She's not even what Avenatti is doing is not even lawyerly here. He's acting as a political opposition research operative. And which, in one period of his life, he was. He was a opposition research expert for Rahm Emanuel, who is now the mayor of Chicago. But really, if you find out who's paying Avenatti, you have a lot of things answered here. You'd have, I don't know how many, a lot of things, but you'd have something very relevant, I think, known. Because then you would find out who's really behind all this Stormy stuff and what its abject purpose is. And we know what the abject purpose is, and that's to destroy Cohen and in the process get close so that the shrapnel and the fumes somehow reach Trump. Well, look, I appreciate the call, Jay. I'm glad that they let the call out of the Los Angeles grid. It's great to hear from you. He mentioned he's just 300 short miles south of my adopted hometown. It's in the news today. Actually, West Sacramento is in the news. Now, West Sacramento shares something with Rio Linda. I offered to move when I lived there from 1984 to 1987, I offered to move to both places if they would name the town Limbaugh, California. I offered to move there to raise property values and to create a real estate boom. And the first place I offered was West Sacramento. They rejected it. Rio Linda was next. They rejected it. Well, West Sacramento's in the news. They have launched a program. They're the first city to launch a new program that watches what people post about it online. The pilot project gives West Sacramento city leaders a look at what is trending in the city and whether it's good or bad. It is creating privacy concerns around how the data is being used. So West Sacramento is monitoring social media for people making comments about the city. And it's presumed here that if anybody goes online and makes bad comments about West Sacramento, that West Sacramento will let them know. When a wave of mailbox thefts hit the city last year, that people complained on social media and West Sacramento was watching, city leaders were alerted to the community concerns by a new system. Yeah, we saw that the thing that most people were talking about were mailbox thefts, said the mayor. That's something we might not have noticed just by waiting for people to come to City Hall or file complaints. The city is using Zen City. It's a system that crawls through publicly available social media posts on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And it takes all of that data and sorts through it to find out what people are talking about and whether it's positive or negative. And the mayor said, yeah, the purpose of Zen City is to see the big picture. Okay, now it's being portrayed here as a good thing. If people complaining about their mailboxes being stolen, we'll find out about it and we'll deal with it. But, of course, that's kind of stuff that's never the end point. What happens if people start tweeting negative things about the mayor's daughter or the mayor's wife or the mayor himself or herself? How many of you have seen, by the way, the Google presentation of their latest innovation in what they call Google Assistants, called Google Duplex? How many of you have seen this? Well, let me briefly describe it for you when we get back. Don't go away. Okay, Google Duplex. Here's what happened. They demonstrated this earlier this week. Just like Apple, Google has a giant convention every year for their developers and customers to tell them what's new in their operating systems that they'll may be able to incorporate in their apps and so forth. Google shows off the latest innovation in what they call Google Assistant, which is their version of Siri. And what they've done is rather remarkable. They have engineered their assistant to be able to fool a human being. They played an example of their artificial intelligence robot calling a hair salon to make a hair appointment. It's a female voice. Hi, I'm trying to get an appointment around noon next Wednesday. And the person on the phone, it was a real call. And the person on the phone says, hang on, do you have a time frame? Well, maybe 12 noon to 2 p.m. would work. And the person on the phone says, okay, hang on. And the robot goes, mm-hmm. Come back, get a time, robot agrees. The whole time, the person at the hair salon never knew she was talking to a robot. It was that real. It was that filled with context. It was able to take a comment made by the person on the phone and go, as though, okay, I'll wait, fine. It was uncanny. They demonstrated 3 different calls to show how this is coming. It's not ready to roll out yet, but they claim it's going to be ready to roll out soon. The tech community has had 2 basic reactions. The first reaction has been to marvel in disbelief. The second reaction has been, how dare you? How dare you engage in this kind of action where you can literally fool human beings? This is the epitome of dishonesty. You owe it to these people to tell them they're talking to a robot. Google, you can't just do that. And then people started imagining. You know, I'll give you a great illustration of the potential pitfalls of this. You all know now that the way the left tries to destroy media people they don't like is to create these massive attacks on advertisers. They flood these advertisers with what are bots, claiming to be customers from all over the country, and their texts or their emails or their tweets, and they say they're never going to sponsor, never going to buy, never going to patronize until you stop advertising on X program. It's how they got Glenn Beck off Fox. It's how they got O'Reilly. They've tried it here. We uncovered who they were. There were 10 people involved in the effort to quote-unquote stop Rush. But imagine every one of those bots being thought of as a real person. Instead of a tweet or an email, you are at your business, the XYZ widget company, and your phone doesn't stop ringing, and you answer it, and every time you pick it up, it is an artificially intelligent robot that you can't tell the difference from a human being. And this robot has been programmed to tell you that your business is going to burn, your business is going to lose all of its customers if you keep advertising with X. If the people receiving the call from the new Google Assistant duplex do not know that it's a bot, then I don't think we can even begin to imagine the potentially negative and fraudulent uses, because it's not going to just stop, with some guy wanting to use this bot to make a hair appointment to save him the time of having to do it. But some of the criticism has been funny. And it's been so typical. There was one leftist who criticized this. All this is just the elite who don't want to have to lower themselves to the level of a receptionist. They would rather use a bot than actually talk to somebody so deeply beneath them. This is hardest on the underprivileged and the poor. They will continue to be taken advantage of by these technological... I just had to laugh myself silly. You think the thing wrong with this is that the elite are going to use this to avoid having to talk to people beneath them? But stop and think of the example I gave. When every one of these bots that currently bombards wherever the left sends them, imagine if the Russians get hold of this. And instead of never-ending bots and fake advertising, every one of these attacks features different voices made to look like real people calling to complain or advise or promise or threaten or what have you. I heard it. I watched it. And I'm telling you, it was eerie how this Google duplex, essentially artificial intelligent robot, was able to sound in every regard, including in conversation with a real person, like a human being. Back in a second. When we get back, I'm going to explain something. The only parallel in the last campaign to Watergate was Barack Obama. There is no parallel between Donald Trump and his campaigns and Watergate and Richard Nixon. Obama owns all of it. And in fact, what Obama has done makes what Nixon did appear to be romper room. And I will explain this in detail when we get back. Meeting and surpassing all audience expectations. Every day. Rush Limbaugh behind the golden EIB microphone on Friday. Let's continue.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
And here we are in the middle of the fastest 3 hours in media, and already we've blown through two of them. One exciting, busy broadcast hour remains. Telephone number, if you want to join us, 800-282-2882. The email address, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Okay, so I said earlier that the drive-bys and the Democrat Party only have past experience to go on to build on. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I want to hammer this because it's really, really the truth. The drive-by media, the entire journalism community, since Watergate, has been attempting to make it happen again. I mean, it was a seminal moment. The media was able to get rid of a duly elected president, Richard Nixon. How did they do it? Well, they did it by forcing him to resign, and they did that by seeing to it that he was losing the support of the American people. How did they do that? They did that with never-ending innuendo over Watergate. And by the time it all crescendoed, nobody really remembered what Watergate was. They just thought it was rotten and that Nixon was behind it, and that Nixon tried to cheat the Democrats out of the election. And for that, he had to go. Ever since then, the media has been desiring to relive that moment. All new young journalists. In fact, it was Watergate and 60 Minutes that made so many young journalists want to go into the business in the first place. But once a formative experience like that happens, they want it to happen again and again. They want to relive it. This generation of journalists wants their Watergate. They want to be able to say that they got rid of a duly elected president that they hate. The American people do not hate Trump yet, but they're doing their best to make the American people hate Trump. And believe me when I tell you, there are many in the drive-by media who are trying to relive this, or in their cases, live it for the first time. It's kind of like you throw an impromptu party on a Saturday night. It goes great. You say, you know what, let's do it next Saturday. And you try. But it's never the same. As never as fun, never as magical as when it was spontaneous. Their creativity is such that they do everything according to the prior rubric, narrative, model, what have you. And so this is what they're trying to do. So what's the claim against Trump versus the claim against Nixon? Well, the plumbers went into the offices of the Democrat National Committee at Watergate. The head of the Democrat National Committee at the time was a guy named Lawrence O'Brien. And these plumbers went in there, and they left evidence of their presence. They put locks, or they put masking tape over the locks of the door so that when they left, the doors would not lock so they could get back in. Their original purpose, as far as anybody knows, the original purpose was to plant listening devices in the offices of Larry, the Democrat National Committee. And they failed. And when it became known what had happened, remember, it was a third-rate burglary, and the media just wouldn't let it go, and they kept building it up, and they built it up to something in people's minds was far more than a third-rate burglary. And it ended up that Nixon didn't want to sell his people out. Nixon was simply trying to arrange, I think, for some money for some of these people to be able to mount a defense. And so he played it wrong. But in terms of what Nixon didn't know anything about this when it had happened. He didn't order it or any of that. But now let's look at what has happened here. The Barack Obama administration not only tried to bug the Trump campaign, they succeeded. The Obama administration succeeded in planting an informant in the Trump campaign. This we know. It's been confirmed. We don't know who, but we know that it happened. We don't know the timing yet. We don't know at what stage of the campaign the informant was planted in the Trump campaign, but we know that it happened. We know that the Obama administration used a political opposition research document, the Steele dossier. They tried to make it appear as though it was legitimate and real intelligence. And it was all fake. It was made up. None of it corroborated. None of it verified. This, too, was ordered by people in the Obama administration. So if you want to draw a Watergate parallel, you have to draw the parallel not to Trump. Trump hasn't bugged anybody. Trump has not planted listening devices. Trump does not have informants. He did not have informants in the Hillary campaign. That was all Obama. Nixon's plumbers, they left a bug inside the headquarters. It didn't work. Obama put an actual human being in Trump's campaign. Nixon knew nothing about the plumbers, but what did Obama know about the mole in the Trump campaign? And when did he know it? So if you really want to draw the Watergate analogy, it points right to Barack Obama. Note, none of that is being investigated. Not a single shred of it, not a morsel of that is being investigated. In fact, I believe that this entire investigation of Trump is actually a cover-up of what the Obama intelligence community, Department of Justice, FBI, what they did to try to nail Trump during the campaign and to corrupt his transition period after he won the election to destroy or paralyze his presidency. Now, let's go to the audio soundbites. Let's return. We're going to pick up here with David Axelrod. We're at audio soundbite number 6. This is this morning on CNN. Trump had a magical appearance last night in Elkhart, Indiana. It was Trump to perfection. It was Donald Trump as he is, Donald Trump who he is. Donald Trump had an overflowing place with people eating out of the palm of his hand. He was talking about American greatness. He was talking about how great the people in the hall are, how important they are to the country. He continued to explain his agenda that is all about loving America and making it great. So here's Axelrod now on with Allison Camerata at CNN. And she asks him, what is it like for you? I mean, you have to sit here, you have to watch Trump dismantle the Obama legacy. What is it like for you, Mr. Axelrod, to have to watch this happen?
I'm wondering how many of those things could the President of the United States sit here and talk to you for more than 3 minutes about in detail? I suspect he doesn't know. The barometer that he uses is not, is this in the national interest? Did Obama support it? Did he sponsor it? He's about the business of trying to arouse his base, not about the policy. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before, where one president spends all his time trying to malign a former president. I think he resents the fact that Obama left as a respected president with high approval ratings, that the elites liked Obama. And so he really wants to tear down the Obama legacy.
Well, I'll tell you, he is tearing it down, and it's driving these people nuts. So I guess they're telling themselves that Trump is this rotten, dastardly guy who's simply tearing down Obama's legacy because he's jealous of Obama. That Obama was liked by these egghead, phony, baloney, plastic banana good time elitists, and Trump isn't. And so since Trump is jealous, he's going to get even with Obama. He's going to tear every Obama legacy item apart. The truth of the matter is, Obama's legacy was built on balsa wood. Trump could not get rid of Obama's legacy if it was real. If Obama's legacy really were attached to public opinion, meaning if the American people really, really liked what Obama had done, Trump would not be able to tear this apart. Trump would not have been able to be elected. Trump is only doing what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail. He's only fulfilling promises. Now, they can gripe at the motivation all they want. I think they tell themselves, this guy's an idiot. He couldn't talk for 3 minutes on the Iran deal. He couldn't talk for 3 minutes on North Korean nukes. He's such an idiot. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He's motivated solely by taking Obama's legacy apart. I think these people are fumingly jealous. They cannot believe that somebody outside has come in and so effectively dismantled whatever it was the great Obama did. And the only reason Trump is able to dismantle it, as I said yesterday, is because it really isn't rooted. Obama's legacy is not rooted in America. About the only thing that is Obamacare. Obamacare was passed via legislation, so Trump just can't come in and eliminate it with executive actions or executive orders. But aside from Obamacare, pretty much Obama did was via executive action or executive order. He didn't do it with consensus with Congress. There was no legislation. There were no roots. Meaning the Obama legacy did not have enough popularity to actually become law and therefore have roots and be representative of public opinion. If Obama's legacy was so popular, then Hillary Clinton would have won. Trump wouldn't have gotten to first base. Trump wouldn't have had anywhere near the success he did if Obama's legacy were that popular. I think these people just can't come to grips with the fact that everybody else rejected Obama. The elites loved Obama for all these silly reasons, like the sharp crease in his slacks, because he had mastered intellectual speaking mannerisms and so forth. And they're just beside themselves. Somebody they view as an abject idiot can come in and undo it. When the truth of the matter is, Donald Trump is proving that he can do what all these elites can do. They can't do what he has done in his life. David Axelrod couldn't anymore get anywhere near what Donald Trump has done in his life than John Brennan could, that Hillary Clinton could, that Bill Clinton could, that Barack Obama could. But Trump has come in and shown he can do everything they do and do it smarter. He can come in, he can outsmart them, he can beat them on their field at what they do. That's gotta burn them. It's got to smoke them. It's got to infuriate them. It's got to intimidate them. They couldn't play on Donald Trump's field if they wanted to. But he has shown he can come in and beat them every day. The only thing they've got to try to stop Trump is a phony investigation that hasn't found anything purporting to explain Trump in terms of illegality. Let's go to Trump. Let's listen to a little bit of Trump in Elkhart, Indiana last night. This is, how many bites do we have here? We have three, and here's the first.
Obama, President Obama. Paid $1.8 billion for hostages. Kim Jong-un did a great service to himself, to his country by doing this. But those hostages came out with respect. We didn't pay for them. We're going to set the table. We're going to make a great deal for the world, for North Korea, for South Korea, for Japan, for China.
This crowd is going nuts. Now let me explain something here. Let's go back to Bill Clinton and Madeleine Albright. George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright. Then we have George W. Bush and whoever his national security people were and his secretaries of state. And then we had Barack Hussein O. and all the brilliant people here. And not a one of them was able to alter the behavior of Kim Jong-un and iota. In fact, it could be argued that under H.W. Bush, Clinton, W. Bush, and Obama, Kim Jong-un and his dad, Kim Jong-il, and the Kim Jong before that were able to get stronger. And in fact, it was the Clinton administration that tried to buy them off. Hey, we'll give you some equipment here to help you build up your nuclear grid. Just don't turn it into weapons. Kim Jong-un said, sure, fine, you want to give us, we'll promise you we won't do nukes. And Madeleine Albright said, fine. They made the deal. He starts developing nukes and missiles. The Clinton administration enabled him. Previous administrations did the same or were unable to deter Kim Jong-un's practices, North Korea's practices at all. Here comes Donald Trump. It's not even a year and a half into his presidency, and some things that have never been accomplished with North Korea have already been accomplished, and the road looks like it's going to continue to improve. And here's David Axelrod talking about how Trump doesn't even know what he's doing, and Trump couldn't hold a conversation for 3 minutes on any of these things. He's just trying to dismantle what Obama did. I'm telling you, these people are seething, folks. They just can't stand this. And remember, there's not a one of them that could even get on the field in Donald Trump's league. He is on the field in their league, and beating them. It's not supposed to happen, and it makes perfect sense that they're infuriated, angry, discombobulated, and unhinged. By the way, I looked this up, and our caller from Los Angeles is actually correct, and I don't know why. I don't know how I missed this. You don't understand how embarrassing this is. A guy calls and talks about, and I don't know anything about it. That's just not done. But Stormy Daniels was indeed planning on running for the Senate in New Orleans when David Vitter got into trouble. Was it back in 2009? And her campaign slogan was going to be screwing people honestly. And I'm not going to right here, folks. There's a Newsweek story on it from January of this year. And I didn't know. How do you not remember the name Stormy Daniels? Make America Horny Again tour is what she's currently on. But she wanted to run for the Senate. Screwing people honestly was going to be her slogan. Let's head back to the phones open line Friday. We actually have somebody from Elkhart, Indiana here. Kevin, glad you called, sir. How are you doing?
How you doing, Rush?
Fine and dandy. Thank you.
Yeah, I attended the rally last night with my 16-year-old daughter, and it was phenomenal. Trump, he knows how to work a crowd.
How many people were in there last night?
Well, I'll say 7,000 to 7,500, depending on what the fire marshal allowed to be in, but around 7,000.
Okay, well, that was the capacity to play, so it was filled.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So
there's
7,500.
a ton of people outside still, so yeah, it was loud. People were great, and his messages were great, and I follow Trump and, all of his rallies, watch on TV, and I know his shtick, and one thing that stuck out to me was he mentioned something about America will not be defeated from outside forces. The only way America is going to be defeated is within, and that was something new I heard last night, and that really stuck with me.
Had you not heard that before?
No, I haven't seen it in any of his rallies or anything. And
no, I mean not from just Trump, but from anybody. You've not heard anybody espouse the belief that our greatest threat is internal and domestic.
Oh yeah, I've heard that before.
Okay, but this is the first time you've heard Trump say it.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard it.
All right, so this kind of deviated from what you call Trump's shtick. So how did you interpret it?
Well, it struck a chord with me. I was like, whoa, that's something new I've never heard. And it's true.
It's not just it's happening. It has been happening. Right. It's been happening for decades. I mean,
I'm just wondering why he took so long to say something like that.
Who knows? I mean, I can't say for sure that he's never said it before. I don't know that it's the first time he's ever said it believing it, but it's not an uncommon thing for people to believe. I mean, just simply look at the education system in this country. It's been under assault, admittedly, by the Soviet Union since the 40s and 50s. And it's ongoing to this day. It's not just the Russians, Chi-Coms. There's every kind of attempt to undermine this country domestically. He's right about that. A man, a legend, a way of life. The saga continues. Back to the phones. Richard in Raleigh, North Carolina. Glad you waited, sir. Hello.
Hi, Rush. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much to you and Snerdley for taking my call.
Wait a minute now. This is the second person that has thanked me and Snerdley for taking the call. This is the first day. Since when does Snerdley get thanked for taking the call?
Snerdley is your right-hand man, and his job is to make you look good and make you successful. And if he let...
I understand it, but the second... It's fine and dandy. I'm just curious. I notice patterns. There's no one more observant than I. Nobody more situationally aware than I. And you are the second guy today, thanks to you and Snerdley for taking my call. So I'm just wondering if there's a whole network of people out there planning to greet me this way. It's no big deal. Anyway, what was it that you wanted to talk about?
Yes, sir. this ties into what your last caller mentioned about how the only way America will be destroyed is by forces acting within. And I believe Abraham Lincoln said that back during the Civil War. But there was a meeting in Atlanta, and the Washington Free Beacon had an article about this from April 19th. But it was the Democracy Alliance Spring Conference, and it was a private kind of under the Rose type meeting in Atlanta, and it's one of their main donor groups. And in this meeting, there were two prime examples of things you have always warned us about the left. One is their politics of personal destruction, and the second, the left must always hide its true agenda. And I'll take the politics of personal destruction first. There's an alliance called the Solidar Alliance, or the Solidar Action Fund, and basically a lot of left-wing wealthy donors have put together a pool of money, and their job is to attack and silence voices on the right. And it looks like perhaps this is my supposition, through lawfare, hiring people like Stormy Daniels. I mean, who is paying for her attorney and so on and so forth? Basically to destroy people on the right. Basically, they're continuing.
Let me step in here, because this isn't anything new. This just happened to be the latest meeting. But this is very common. This is just the left getting together, and they're organizing in secret with their don't. But it's not really secret because everybody knows. I mean, you found out about it, and Washington Free Beacon reported on it. And this is where they get together and they organize the actions their donors are going to take. And it's where they make their plans, how the money is going to be spent, how their agenda is going to be advanced. One thing that is different is they're starting to get a little bit more outgoing about their agenda. They're not doing quite as much to hide it. But the politics of personal destruction is something that's been common with them. And like they just had, we just learned that a former aide to Dianne Feinstein had been organizing 10 wealthy Democrat people from Hollywood and Silicon Valley to come up with $50 million to pay Christopher Steele to keep investigating Trump, to keep adding to the dossier, because they're dissatisfied with what Mueller has failed to produce. But no, you're right. I mean, they're out there. They're constantly arranging these, and the Republicans do it too. I mean, there's really nothing nefarious about this. Both parties do it. Both have their agendas. Both have their objectives. In light of this, grab soundbite number 24. I wanted to go back to Tuesday. This is Maxine Waters. I'm going to go to the floor of the House of Representatives. Maxine has had it with this whole idea of make America great again. And there was a bill being debated, the auto financing rule, and Maxine had some things to say.
I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it is your president that's dividing this country. And don't talk to me about the fact that we don't understand what happens on the automobile. No, I will not yield. No, I will not yield.
Okay.
Don't tell me that we don't understand. That's the attitude that's been given toward women time and time again.
The gentlelady will suspend. The chair wishes to remind all members that they are to address their remarks to the chair.
He's down here making a speech for this dishonorable president of the United States of America. Having said that, I reserve the balance of my time, and no, yield? I do not yield not 1 second to you. Not 1 second. Not 1 second to you.
What's she mad about? She's mad about Make America Great Again. It just sends them off the rails. What is it that makes her mad about that? She claims it's racist. She claims it's divisive. Making America Great again somehow is code language that leaves minority groups out of the whole process. It's on one hand, it's really dangerous to try to treat these people rationally and react to them rationally, because they're not. One of the reasons they're upset, there's yet another generic poll showing the Democrats have lost their 16-point advantage. Going back to December, the Democrats had a 16-point lead in the generic ballot. There's just a poll where they ask people, are you going to vote Republican or Democrat in the November midterms. No names, no candidates, just party ID. Democrats had a 16-point lead. So CNN and what was CNN? I think Monmouth both have shown that lead down to 1 or 2. Reuters is the third polling group now finding that the Democrat advantage is down to 1 point. That is within the margin of error. Grab soundbite number 11, Tom Bevan, co-founder Real Clear Politics. He was on Tucker last night. Question, a new poll over at CNN shows that Democrats have only a 3-point advantage on the generic ballot. Is this real? What does it mean?
I think it's real. You go back and look in mid-December, the Democratic lead in the generic ballot, and that's the question. If the election were held today, would you vote for the Republican or Democrat? Democrats had a 13-point lead. As of today, it's down to 6 in our Real Clear Politics average. The CNN poll went from 16-point lead for Democrats 2 months ago down to 3. Another poll showing it down to 1 point. So this is real. It is, just as a point of reference, in 2006, when Democrats won 30 seats, they finished with a 7.9 percentage lead in the generic ballot. I think they're in that range where it's making them very, very nervous.
Next question, the Stormy Daniels story. It's dominated the coverage for the past 3 to 4 weeks, months. What's the effect of the Stormy Daniels story, Mr. Bevan, on all of this polling data?
It's just the opposite. Not only has it hurt his numbers have been ticking upward the entire time. And again, that's something that, and you see Democrats, now you talk to them, they're now somewhat annoyed by this. Talk to Nancy Pelosi and others. They say, look, this is distracting from our message. They want to try and get back to reaching voters. And voters have actually tuned that out now and are paying attention to the other stuff, which Trump has had a pretty good few weeks.
Okay, so 2 things here that the Democrats have invested in that are blowing up on them. One's impeachment, because now you've got even Pencil-neck Schiff running around saying, we need to stop talking about impeachment. And Pelosi, we need to stop talking about impeachment. Now they're adding Stormy Daniels. We need to stop talking about Stormy, because this guy Avenatti, this guy has been, somebody's run the numbers, this guy has gotten the if he's a lawyer, which we kind of doubt, but if he's a lawyer, he has been given the equivalent of $150 million worth of airtime with these combined interviews that he's had on MSNBC and CNN. If he had to go buy the time that he's had to sell the virtues, quote unquote, of his client, it would have cost him $150 million minimum. That's how much free airtime this guy's been. Who is he? And what is he? And how many people do you know? This Newsweek story from January, where Stormy Daniels wanted to run for the Senate in 2009 on something like screwing the American people honestly or some such thing. How come that news has not been part of this whole sordid tale? I mean, why is it that all anybody thinks of Stormy Daniels is that she's a porn star that might or might not have had some kind of fling with Trump, about whom $130,000 was paid, and she can't legally talk about it? Who knew that she once thought about running for the Senate? Meaning this woman is every bit attuned to the American political system as anybody else. She's not this victim, a struggling woman working against the odds, trying to make a living for her and her family, and she's had to resort to pornography to do it. She's so bedraggled, such a poor, innocent waif. And now she's been dragged into the Trump world. She wasn't dragged into anything. If anybody's dragging anybody, it's Stormy, dragging a whole bunch of people along with her. But how does that aspect, how does her interest in seeking the Senate back in 2009, how does it never make this story? And how is it that we don't know how she found Avenatti and who's paying him? Because she doesn't have the money to pay him. Is he being paid? Or is all of this some kind of giant conceived strategery that's just part of the Democrat media complex agenda? Probably the latter. But there has to be money involved somewhere. He's not going to do this gratis. There's got to be a payoff somehow, somewhere. We will be back. Don't go away. Executing assigned host duties flawlessly with half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair in case the media is listening so they have a chance to keep up. Our next caller, I think, went to the bathroom. Wait a minute, you took the question down. He wanted to know, why doesn't Jeff Sessions do anything about this? He's heard us talk all day about the fact that Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Committee, wants to know from Rosenstein, the FBI, the DOJ, what has gone on during the campaign. And you remember, Devin Nunes actually threatened to hold Jeff Sessions in contempt for refusing to provide this information, which the House Intelligence Committee has had subpoenaed for months now. And Rosenstein has stonewalled this, and then we have turned over things. It's been heavily redacted. And the answer to this is, it's not Sessions. Sessions could not be stonewalling, or Rosenstein could not be stonewalling, unless Trump let them. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood here. This is not intended to be critical of Trump. It's just to tell you that Donald Trump, any president, can declassify anything, anytime he wants. If Donald Trump wants the FISA warrant application declassified so that we can all see what the FBI used in their application to get that FISA warrant, he can do it. If everybody gets caught up in who is this spy, who did the FBI hire, and who did they plant, who is the informant in the Trump campaign, and when were they put there, Donald Trump can force that to be released. If Jeff Sessions will not do it, it's because Donald Trump is not forcing him to do it. And that my only point is that the ultimate authority resides with Trump, with the president here. In other words, Jeff Sessions cannot refuse. If Trump says, Jeff, Mr. Attorney General, declassify that and release it. If Sessions says, no, sir, I won't, then we've got problems. But if Sessions refuses congressional requests and Devin Nunes wants to hold him in contempt, fine, but the only way Sessions can get away with it is if Trump lets him. So we're back to, why won't Trump declassify any of this? Now, I've explained my theory 4 or 5 times in the past 2 days, so I don't have time to go through it again. But look, there's an inspector general that's finished, I think, largely his work here, and there's an IG report coming on a lot of what's going on at the FBI. It could well be that Trump doesn't want to get out in front of that. But I think it really comes down to the fact that there is a strategy involved here. And it's not that Trump wants to be seen as a victim, because he's not. It's more a David and Goliath narrative that's been set up. He likes the appearance that all of these deep state guys are aligned and trying to get rid of him. He thinks there's value in this being seen over and over again every day. I have to take a break. We'll be back. Don't go away, folks. By the way, there's one more reason why Trump doesn't declassify, and that is his lawyers are scared to death that if he does, they're going to accuse him of obstruction. Say he declassifies. Mueller says, we were right on the verge of getting him, and he knew it, so he goes public with all this and blows up our investigation, trying to avoid that kind of thing as well. Believe me, I don't think he needs that yet. Just be patient. See you Monday, folks.